Hello and welcome to Chaos in the Class. So today I am not being able to have a classroom inside, so I am sitting outside. So this ought to be pretty interesting as far as this goes. But we are starting with Zeus Interferes. And our story is about to wrap up, but oh my gosh, has it gotten good. The fighting is fierce. Now, Zeus is the god who said, nobody is supposed to interfere. Then all of a sudden, there was some interference by the gods, the interfering gods, and now it's looks like the battle's about to wrap up after a 9-year battle. And so let's find out what happens, because Zeus is now going to interfere. He's like the big guy of all the gods. He's like the dude of the gods. Okay, here we go. Grab your reading book, and this is on page 149, and we have this is a story being retold by Nick McCarty, and the illustrations are by Victor Ambrus, and I am Brenda Fuller with reading this aloud, and this is from Kingfisher Epics, and the story is retold by Nick McCarty. Let's see, and then the illustrations by Victor Ambrus, and then I'm Brenda Fuller with Chaos in the Class. Zeus Interferes. In the morning, the gates of the city remained locked, and down on the beach, the proud ships remained propped up on their keels. Now, the keel, when I go sailing, is that center board that goes down the center of the boat, and that keel is really long, and it helps with stability so you don't just like fall over. So the ships are propped up by that. That tells me that the ships are not ready to just be in the ocean sailing off. So there would need to be probably a high tide. If it's low tide, then they're probably not going to be able to get all of their men in there and then push those boats off. So it sounds to me like the boats are kind of like stable and stuck there. They're propped up on their keels. It was as if the world without Hector had changed, and even the gods were resting. The sea was still, except for a tiny ripple at the edge as it softly rose and fell, breathing. That's interesting that the author put that in there. The sea was still, except for a tiny ripple at the edges as it softly rose and fell, breathing. So when you take a breath, your chest rises, goes in and out. So if you think about the sea having the waves coming in and out, so the author is kind of describing it as the sea is breathing. Achilles looked out over the pale sea, mourning his friend. A company of men and mules searched for driftwood and logs. Tall oaks were felled. That means that they were chopped down, or they fell down in a storm. Tall oaks were felled, split, and dragged to the shore where Achilles stood. Patroclus's corpse was brought in procession. So a procession is a long line of people paying respect. Embalmed, that's something you do to a body to preserve it. And sweet smelling. They believed in putting a lot of herbs around the body to preserve it, and placed on the pyre. Around it, offerings were laid. Double-handled jars of honey and oil, 4 horses, and 2 of the dead man's dogs were placed beside him. Then Achilles did something terrible. He sent 12 brave Trojan prisoners on the same journey and placed their bodies on the pyre. The gods sent an eager wind to kindle the fire. In other words, kindle the fire means that they are blowing it. A fire needs oxygen in order for it to catch fire, and so therefore, like if you're ever in science, you'll be studying a fire blanket is something that you can use to put out a flame, because the fire needs oxygen. If there was ever a stove fire, a lot of times people will just put a pot over it so it doesn't get the oxygen. The billowing smoke could be seen inside of Troy. Achilles had promised to give the corpse of Hector to the dogs, and would have done so had after Aphrodite not protected it with perfumed oils and hidden it in a sea mist. Funeral games were held as a pall of smoke lifted up into the pale sky and reached as far as Olympus, where Apollo complained to Zeus. Achilles is getting up every morning, harnessing his chariot horses, and then dragging Hector's body around the barrow they have made for Patroclus. It is shameful. Hera tried to argue that it didn't matter, that Achilles, son of a goddess, might do as he pleased. But the Thunder Maker roared at her, "Not if I say he shall not." Zeus sent for Thetis. "Tell your son that if he refuses to return Hector's body to Priam," remember that's King Priam, "his father, he risks my fury. Remind him," Zeus muttered cruelly, "that he hasn't got much longer to live himself." So you hear that warning being fired. Thunder rumbled throughout the mountain tops, and sheets of lightning lit up the sky as Thetis hurried away to Achilles, who was at the water's edge throwing stones into the sea. "Achilles," she called, "it does you no honor to treat the body of noble Hector as you do." Achilles turned away angrily. "You will listen to your mother. Zeus is angry. Look over the water and see." And she pointed at the shimmering lightning. "Zeus orders you to accept a ransom from King Priam." Across the water, thunder rumbled from one side of the sky to the other. Look at that illustration and look at that big fire. Oh, I missed something. Across the water, thunder rumbled from one side of the sky to the other. Achilles nodded and bowed his head. "Very well. If that is what I must do, let it be." He sighed and lifted his head. The lightning stopped, the thunder died away, and a soft wind blew over the sea. So it calmed down the gods. A brave old man. In Troy, in King Priam's palace, there was only the constant sibilance of women weeping. Andromache sat in her room, staring at the wall, tears running down her begrimed and bloody face. Hector's mother sat on the terrace outside the window and refused to eat or drink or even to speak with her broken husband, King Priam. Hector's children watched and whispered to each other from time to time. At last King Priam slept. Iris came to him in a dream with a message from Zeus. "Priam, know that Zeus wants you to ransom your son for Achilles. Take courage, take suitable gifts, and you will succeed. Go alone." Priam stirred in his sleep. "Take one old servant to drive a cart filled with your gifts and large enough to bring back your brave son's corpse. You will have the protection of Hermes until you reach Achilles' hut. After that, you will be alone with him. He will not kill you, nor will anyone else. Achilles fears Zeus." Priam awoke and told his family, "I'm going to down to the Greek ships to ask Achilles to release Hector's body." The family were terrified that he would be harmed, but Priam refused to listen. He gathered together the richest clothes and the household goods, the best cooking pots, a jeweled cup from Thrace, as well as pieces of gold plate. Trojan citizens told him he was crazy to believe Achilles would not kill him. Priam raised his staff and ordered them to leave his palace. "This is my son. Go. Mind your own business. If I am meant to be killed by Achilles, then I will gladly die beside my son. Just leave me to do as I will." He turned then to his other sons. So he is saying, look, it is that important for me to get my son's body back. If this ends my life, then it ends my life. Now he's going to have this something that he tells his sons. He turned then to his other sons. I wish you were all dead and Hector lived. 3 brave sons I lost in this war, Mestor, Troilus, and the charioteer, and now the godlike Hector. King Priam looked around and saw Paris standing beside Helen. Paris, you will fill the cart with treasures, then I'll leave. I can't bear the sight of you. As soon as the cart was filled with the ransom, Priam's wife came to him with a gold cup of fine wine so that he could make a libation to Zeus to ensure his safe return. So remember, they all believe in making a sacrifice to the gods. So brought a very fine thing of wine. You don't waste that stuff. So that was like a big sacrifice to be poured out to offer to Zeus. I don't want you to leave me, husband, but as you must, please send a prayer to Zeus, son of Cronus, and ask for an omen to be sent as you ride down to the Greek lines. Okay, I want to talk to you about Cronus. Chrono is the beginning of chronological. Chrono is time, okay? Son of Kronos. Kronos is a Greek god also, and he's the father of time. So you can think of things as like chronological order, that would be in time order. Um, and you might come up with some more chrono words or chron words. And it should, in chronological order, CHRONO and then logical. Okay. I don't want you to leave me, husband, but as you must, please send a prayer to Zeus, son of Kronos, and ask for an omen to be sent as you ride down to the Greek lines. Priam poured the libation and made the prayer. Zeus heard his words. As the gates of the city opened and Priam and his old servant rode out alone on the mule cart, Zeus sent a hunting eagle soaring high up in the darkening sky as a good omen. The sun was sinking beyond the edge of the world as Priam approached the Greek ships. Okay, it says the sun was sinking beyond the edge of the world. Now, remember, back then, they believed that the earth was flat and that you could just sail off the edge of the earth. World as Priam approached the Greek ships. It was undoubtedly dangerous for the old man and his servant. They stopped to rest the mules and let them drink. A man came out of the shadows. How could they know it was the god Hermes come to ease their way? Priam told him they were looking for Achilles, and Hermes agreed to escort them. They made their way through the lines, invisible to the sentries and the Greek warriors, until they reached Achilles' hut. So think about that's hard to do. They kind of sneaked in unseen. They were invisible to the sentries. Remember, those sentries are the people standing guard at attention and watching over the whole rest of the whole area. And they will alert if they see anything wrong. So for them to sneak by there, invisible to the Greek warriors until they reached Achilles' hut, that was impressive. Old Priam climbed down from the wagon, and walked toward the hut. Hermes opened the door and stood in the doorway as the hooded figure went in. Achilles was feasting as Priam strode into the light of the cooking fire. To the astonishment of the others there, the old man immediately knelt in front of Achilles and kissed his hands, the hands that had slaughtered his sons. Well, that has got to be a really hard thing to do, to kneel down and kiss the hands of the one that had slaughtered his sons. I know that that takes a big man to be able to do that, because I know I probably couldn't do that. Achilles, think of your own father and what he would have felt if he was in my place. I had the best of sons, and not one worthy of the name is left to me. Please remember the gods and pity Hector's father. I have humiliated myself by kissing the hand that killed my sons. Surely that must be enough. Remembering his own father, Achilles lifted the crouching figure and wept as Priam wept. Then he spoke quietly to the old man. To have dared to come here alone shows who it was that made Hector what he was. Men are wretched things, and the gods make sure we suffer. He smiled gently at the old man. Remember, sir, that mourning for your son will not bring him back, and that you have more life still. Please sit down and have wine with us. So that's huge, for him to sit down and have wine with us. That's we got some things going on. We got some dialogue going on about making some peace here. Priam refused the kindly offer, but it urged Achilles to accept the ransom he had brought. Achilles said, Priam, I have already decided that your son shall come back with you. It happened as Achilles promised. King Priam brought the brave Hector to Troy, and there his body was prepared by his grieving wife Andromache. She spread sweet oils and the body of her husband on the body of her husband. His mother came and his sisters. Then the body was taken to be burned. So they prepared the body. It was agreed that no attack would be made while the pyre burned, nor while the white bones were placed inside of a golden chest and laid inside a burial pit under a monument of huge stones that the Trojans built outside of their mighty walls. But on the 12th day after the ceremony, Achilles rode his war chariot toward the city, and behind him came his warriors. The war began again. Okay, epilogue. The siege went on. Achilles struck terror into the enemy and took his men raiding in the countryside around the city. The Trojans stayed behind their walls. They had enough food and fresh water. What they lacked was a hero to give them hope. Priam sent messengers to his half-brother, asking him to send his son, Memnon, of Ethiopia. Memnon came, tall and as brave as hunting lion. He agreed to fight the Greeks in return for suitable gifts. All right, check this out. We got a nice little simile going on here. Tall and as brave as a hunting lion. He agreed to fight the Greeks in return for suitable gifts. This warlike man gave courage to the Trojans. They soon roared out of the city, surprising the Greeks, and almost reached the beached ships with their blazing torches. Achilles was away when Thetis brought him the news. Memnon had challenged any Greek to take him in single combat. And King Nestor's bravest son, a friend of Achilles, had been slaughtered by the Ethiopian. Achilles hurried back to Troy, where Ajax was about to fight Memnon. Ajax of 1,000 battles and Memnon each stood their ground before the gates of Troy. Memnon wore a black-maned helmet and carried a war spear with a sharp-bladed head and a long bronze sword. They stared into each other's eyes and waited for the signal. Racing across the open plain, Achilles came, armed for combat. Zeus looked down, holding the scales, the balance of life and death. Paris, unseen by any Greek, crouched behind a shield, stared over the dusty plain, and bent his bow. He waited as Achilles stepped down from his chariot and talked to Ajax. Memnon is mine, Ajax. He killed my friend, the son of Nestor, my friend's friend. I claim the right to do combat with him. Paris smiled and took a 3-barbed arrow from his quiver. Ajax stepped aside and Achilles took his place. Memnon was the first to cast his spear. It hit Achilles' shield, bounced off of the bronze embossing, and lay bent in the dust. Paris knocked an arrow to his bowstring. Now, knocked an arrow to a bowstring means that he loaded it up. Achilles stepped closer to Memnon, leaned back with his arm fully extended, and threw his spear full force at the Ethiopian's neck. Apollo nudged the flying spear aside and saved Memnon's life. So we got an interfering god there. Paris fingered his bow, waiting to avenge his brother Hector. Zeus put a weight in the balance of life and death. It tipped to sentence one of the two fighters to an early journey into the underworld. In other words, Zeus is going to make a decision. One of them will live and one of them won't. Memnon stepped quickly toward Achilles with his sword ready. Achilles feinted to the left and then to the right. Sounds like he's kind of like doing a bob and a weave, kind of like a boxer would. And as fast-footed as ever, lunged straight at the advancing warrior. His sword found a space between the breastplate and the silver-studded belt, and it eased through muscle and gut as the giant warrior ran himself into Achilles' blade. He dropped like a slaughtered bull. Achilles turned his back on Troy and raised his hand in triumph. Seeing his chance, Paris let his arrow fly. It flew as a hawk flies to make its kill. Remorseless, eager, unchangeable, it began to dip toward the ground and lose power. But still it flew straight and true. Achilles had been protected from the weapons of men since the time his mother had dipped him in the dark waters of the river Styx. Now the arrow found the only place her fingers had covered in the whirling waters. It smashed through his heel. It killed him. So Achilles died at the hands of Paris, who had stolen Helen and caused the war. Paris, whom Hector had called a woman, with Achilles went all hope for the Greeks. Agamemnon wanted them to leave and go home, to abandon the city of broad streets. It was Athene who proposed the final cunning solution to the siege. All they have to do is get into the city and open the gates to let in the wild warriors who want nothing more than to sack and loot all of Troy. She said to Hermes, "Tell Agamemnon to listen when someone comes with a way to open that barred and locked gate." Agamemnon listened to the cunning Panopeus. He proposed they build a huge wooden horse, fill it with the bravest men, and then persuade the Trojans that it was an offering to the gods that the Greeks had left when they sailed away. Odysseus later said it was his idea. No one could deny it, as all the others there at the time had died either in Troy or on the journey home. Odysseus was never slow to claim credit, but he was a brave man and agreed to hide inside the wooden horse with 23 armed men. So they hid their army inside. Oh! So they built this giant wooden horse and they're rolling it up and saying, "Hey, this is an offering to the gods. They've all left." After the horse had been rolled into full view of Troy, Agamemnon burned the Greek camp, ordered the boats out to sea, and sailed away. As dawn broke, the Trojans came to the shore out of curiosity. The ships were gone. The siege was over, and they rejoiced. They found one man still scavenging around the camp. He told them the Greeks had made offerings to the gods, and the wooden horse was one of their offerings. The Greeks had said it was to remain on the battlefield. The Trojans argued among themselves about the meaning of the horse. Some saw it as a threat, but eventually they rolled it into their city, closed the gates for the night as usual, and for the first time in 10 years slept without fear of a Greek attack. So probably the sentries that were standing guard probably also slept too. I don't know. From the belly of the wooden horse, the Greek soldiers slipped into the dark streets of the sleeping city. 2 men climbed to the battlements, while the rest hurried to the main gates in the vast stone walls. The men on the battlements lit a fire. Agamemnon saw it from far out at sea, Ah, signal. He ordered the fleet back to the bay below the sleeping city. The gates were unbarred and open to admit Agamemnon's troops. Menelaus and Diomedes came with Ajax. All the heroes left alive came like hunting wolves into the city to join Odysseus. They sacked the city, looted riches, butchered men and boys, and enslaved the children and women. Smoke rose in a mighty pall. Then the fleet, which had been away 10 years, sailed back out across the blood dark sea. Almost all failed to reach home. Even the wily Odysseus only returned after 10 more wild and wandering years, but that is another story. The city walls are still there, layers of black ash and rubble, the haunt of carrion birds. Remember, those are birds that are eating dead stuff, roadkill. From Troy came treasures, gold precious stones, bronze mirrors, gold plates, delicate bracelets, and a filigree crowns. Sometimes in the night, the wind howls over the plain. They see it is the souls of those who died and left their blood in the land around Troy. Oh my goodness, that was so good. Okay, and you know the best part about this whole story, boys and girls? Everybody lived happily ever after in Mrs. Fuller's Chaos in the Class. This has been such a joy. We are going to continue our book talks individually. So I want you to get your buddies and I want you to talk about your aha. Where were the parts that the author gave you some foreshadowing and some do movement? Did you see some of the figurative language going on? Um, let's really go back and kind of look at some of those things and look at your predictions. There were some times we stopped and we made predictions. Were you right? Were you wrong? Did you get a gotcha from the author? Oh, this was awesome book. And I love how the author gives you this. That is a story for another day. So we can go look at some other stories as well. This has been a pleasure. From Chaos in the Class, I'm Brenda Fuller. I want you to hit the like button and subscribe. We're going to do some more read alouds, and I look forward to seeing you in our Chaos class. Have a great day. Bye-bye.